Well, it's December 1775 and tensions are running high here at Great Bridge. The exchange of gunfire has already taken place in Virginia, and the threat of all-out war is at the doorstep. Two sides face off on what could determine the fate of our land for generations to come. Wise counsel is certainly what's needed today, my brethren. And we see in the book of 1 Kings chapter 3, starting verse 16, the young, inexperienced Solomon sits now on the throne of Israel. The scripture says, then came two women, there were harlots unto the king, and stood before him. And the one woman said, O my Lord, I and this woman dwell in one house. I was delivered of a child with her in the house. And it came to pass the third day, after I was delivered, that this woman also delivered, and we were together. There was no stranger in the house, save we two in the house. And this woman's child died in the night because she overlaid it. And she rose at midnight and took my son from beside me, while thine handmaid slept, and laid it in her bosom, and laid her dead child in my bosom. When I rose in the morning to give my child drink, behold, it was dead. And when I considered in the morning, behold, it was not my son, which I did bear. The other woman said, Nay, but the living is my son, and the dead is thy son. And this said, No, but the dead is thy son, and the living is my son. Thus they spake before the king. Then said the king, the one saith, This is my son that liveth, and thy son is dead. And the other saith, Nay, but thy son is dead, and my son is living. And the king said, Bring me a sword. And they brought a sword before the king. And the king said, Divide the living child in two, and give half to one, and half to the other. Then spake the woman whose the living child was unto the king, for her bowels yearned upon her son. And she said, O my lord, give her the living child, and in no wise slay it. The other said, Let it be neither mine nor thine, but divide it. The king answered and said, Give her the living child, in no way slay it. She is the mother thereof. And all Israel heard of thy judgment, which the king had judged, and they feared the king, for they saw that the wisdom of God was in him to do judgment. Solomon, a very wise decision from a wise king who had, Scripture says, the wisdom of God in him. Now, previously, God had appeared to Solomon in a dream and asked him, What shall I give thee? Recorded in the Scriptures, 1 Kings. Give therefore, Solomon speaks, thy servant an understanding heart, to judge thy people, that I may discern between good and bad. For who is able to judge this people so great as these? And the speech pleased the Lord, as Solomon asked this thing. Well, today, my brethren, we have two groups of people living in the same house, fighting over not a child, but our land, and it's already being torn apart by the sword. One group says we shall loyally support the king. The other group says we have expressed our loyalty, and yet our voice falls on deaf ears. One group says the king is our rightful ruler. The other group says the king has a responsibility to rule rightly. What to do, my brethren, and where to turn in times such as these? When two sides are at odds, is the only solution left to fight. My brethren, an appeal to the king is what's needed today. See, Solomon had the wisdom of God in him. God was pleased to give it to him. And God said unto him, Because thou hast asked this thing, and hast not asked for thyself for long life, neither hast asked for riches for thyself, nor hast asked the life of thine enemies, but hast asked for thyself understanding to discern judgment. Behold, I have done according to thy words. Lo, I have given thee a wise and understanding heart, so that there is none like thee before thee, neither after thee shall any arise like thee. Well, Solomon was the rightful king, But he did not ask God for riches, nor for the life of his enemy, as if to build his own self-serving personal kingdom. Rather, he asked for a self-sacrificing wisdom to best serve the people in his kingdom. And that mindset served him well in his decision with the two young women when he said, the king said, give her, speak